Hello and welcome to some astronomy on the edge. So what we have here is the Kizer Apus. And what is Apus? What does that mean? Well, it's a constellation in the southern hemisphere. And I could just as easily have said, welcome to Footloose on the edge, because Apus, that word from the Greek, which literally means footloose. So footless, I should say, not footloose, footless, same thing. So there we have it. So this is it's part of Kizer's Bladesmith series, and this a Bill Henar design. Bill Henar or Bill Henar? There's only one N in that, so it's Henar. So Henar or Henar, I'm not sure. Did a little bit of looking around and scratching around to see if I can find anything about him, and can't find any history or anything specific about the man. But what I can find is some of the products and photographs of some of the stuff that he's designed on Instagram. And I must say, incredibly interesting knife designs and other stuff that he's designed as well. They sort of have a sci-fi look about them, but very, very interesting, appealing things, including spinners and all sorts of other things. So I do recommend you go and have a look on Instagram, search for Bill Henar or Henar. I'm going to say Henar from now on, and have a look at some of the other very, very interesting stuff that he has designed. And well, this knife, no different, a very good looking, interesting knife. And by the way, for those who have subscribed to the channel or have been subscribers to the channel for a while and have watched some of my other reviews, you will recognize this knife. It pops up quite regularly whenever I do a size comparison on a gentleman folder. Inevitably, this knife will be brought out to do the size comparison, and I always do speak about the fact that I will one day review the knife. And well, here it is. It's going to snow. In fact, the weather in South Africa at the moment does feel like it's going to snow. But I'm eventually getting to it. I'm eventually reviewing the knife. So guys, now that's after that introduction and a lot of ramble and waffle, I'm going to be doing the usual materials, dimensions, and weight, and then dive into design and attributes, let me say it again, of this very good looking knife. Right, so we've got a blade steel of CPM S35 VN. Handle is sort of a sandwich type construction. We've got copper on the outside, so that overlay is copper, and then the frame of the knife itself is titanium. We've got a titanium backspacer, titanium pocket clip, and the screws and the pivot cap, those are in stainless steel and Torx. And then the pivot assembly itself, quite an interesting construction there. We've got ceramic ball bearings and steel washers in there, and the action on this knife is beautifully smooth, but I'll speak about that a little bit later as well. Right, let's lay that down. What's next? Dimensions and weight. Let's get cracking. So we've got blade length of 77.1 millimeters, and that is 3.03 inches. Blade thickness is 3.7 millimeters, and that's 0.14 inches. Handle thickness is 14 millimeters, and that's 0.55 inches. Closed length of the knife is 98.4 millimeters, and that's 3.87 inches. And that's excluding that little front flipper, and I'll speak about that a little bit later. You can see that sticks out a bit. So those dimensions are excluding that. What did I say? 98.4 mils and 3.87 inches. Overall length of the knife is 175.26 millimeters. And that is 6.90 inches. And then weight, and do I need to say it? As per usual, I have got manufacturer's stated weights. So in this case, it is the stated weights from Kizer. But I will check that against my own scale. Let's get that centered up and lined up and cranked up. And what are we on? We're on grams. So let's have a look, see what I get here. 110 grams. They've got 112 grams. I'm going to give benefit of the doubt. Sometimes if I move the knife around, we get something different. And there we go. We do. So a little bit closer to theirs. I got 111. They've got 112 grams. Let's see what that looks like in ounces. They've got 3.95 ounces. I got 3.9 ounces. So I think we pretty much agree. Right, let's get the knife open and have a look at, as I said, this handsome and very well made little knife. So looking on Kizer's website, they describe the blade shape as a straight back blade shape, straight back shape, yes. But there is a slight drop to the blade, and you can see sort of at that point where my finger is, there's a slight little drop off to the blade. And then looking at Blade HQ and what else did I look at? Well, a couple of other sites there. Well, in fact, Blade HQ, one of them describes it as a drop point, and I think I might go with that. And then one of the other sites described it as a clip point, and yeah, I think that's maybe a stretch. I don't see that as a clip point. So I would probably go with drop point, but as I say, Kizer themselves, they describe that as a straight back blade. Here we go, waffled on some more, just on blade shape. Rest of the blade, we've got a flat grind, quite a nice little belly to that blade. And by the way, while we're looking at that, the edge on this knife, the edge on this blade is exceptionally tidy, nice and sharp out of the box. And by the way, I've had this knife for quite a while, and it's sort of kept that edge. Might be one of the characteristics of what is it, S35 VN, but certainly when it came out of the box, it was very, very sharp, but also incredibly tidily done. Kizer do tend to do that on their knives. The finish on their knives really good. Very, very thin little ricasso that then opens up behind, little recessed area and a hole in the blade. What's better? Probably like that. A hole in the blade as well. And I'll speak a little bit about that hole when we speak about deployment of the blade as well. But that also just a nice, interesting design element. The narrowest of little swedges that runs probably from about halfway on the blade and then stops short of the tip of the blade. It stops about there. And right at that point where the swedge stops, there's another extra little drop, a little kink and an extra little drop to the tip of the blade. But all in all, quite an interesting looking blade. The more you look at it, the more you kind of see it's one of those. Looking at the spine of the blade, you can see where the swedge starts there, a little bit of narrowing to the blade. Just try to tilt that so the light catches it. A little narrowing to the blade there, gets a little bit thinner, and that then tapers off to the tip around about that point. And then square back design, but little rounded edges, so softened a little bit. And then you can see, interesting as well on the blade, is we've got two areas of jimping. That jimping, by the way, a little bit rounded in itself, so quite soft, not the most grippy jimping I've had in my hands. And then that little bit of jimping, the jimping towards the back of the blade, when you get that closed, you see that that is also the jimping that you use when deploying the knife using that front flipper. And as I said, we'll speak about the deployment a little bit later on. I think that just about covers everything on the blade. No, it doesn't. A little bit of the speak about the finish. So the finish I've also seen described in some places as satin. Now, that to me is a stonewash, pretty fine stonewash, but beautifully done. Very, very good looking. Overall, just a very good looking, nice little design touches and finish touches to the knife. In terms of markings, we've got the Kizer logo. There we've got the S35VN and then the specific model number. And when I say there, it's in that recessed area. It's been etched into that portion. And then on this side, we've got in that same recessed area on the other side of the blade, that's where we've got Apus and Henar. Henar. I think that's, as I said, I think that's how you pronounce it. Right, the overall shape of the blade, one of those, of the knife, I should say, one of those really well integrated, flowing kind of shapes to this knife. You can see the line of the blade as it goes onto the handle and quite a pronounced drop to this handle. But again, the front of it, just a nice little swoop and then the swoop of the blade. Very, very pleasingly one of those sort of pleasingly soothing shapes to this knife. But all in all, very, very good looking. Let's just get the blade closed once again before I do myself injury. And just look a little more closely at the finish. So this particular version, you've probably seen the color, and I might not have mentioned this, but Kizer described this specific knife as copper orange, and it is the copper color. If I turn it like that, you can really see the color of the copper coming through. This knife I've mentioned I've had for quite a while, so it's already got the patina to that copper, which just adds to the look of it. It gets that almost sort of vintage look about it, and I think the more weathered it gets, the better it looks. If I tilt it there and get it at a bit of an angle, you might be able to see under. If I put my finger there and get a little bit of reflection, you see under the clip, there's the original copper color. So it was a very vibrant, fiery sort of copper color. Oh, you can see a little bit of it right there where my finger is. So that's the original copper color when it was new, and you can see how that is sort of aged and patinaed and weathered, as I say. So the finish on that, very, very smooth and slick. The feel overall of this knife is very, very smooth. But you can see around the edge of that copper overlay, we've got a beveled edge, and that quite a wide beveled edge, and then the same on the frame itself. So that frame in the titanium, also this beveled edge around that as well. So with the overlay of copper then running onto that titanium, you get that sort of tiered step down effect, and that, when you get in hand, means that it just is incredibly comfortable in your hand. This knife, it is quite a substantial handle, so it's not a thin handle, and it, that sort of layered effect does make the sort of whole handle feel a little bit rounded, but it really does. It's sort of, for such a narrow handle, the thickness helps it kind of fill your hand when you get to grips with it. And then that's what it looks like in my hands. And I've mentioned in other reviews that I have medium-sized hands, wear a large glove, so that kind of gives you a sense of what that looks like. And you can see that my 4 fingers very comfortably fit into that general shape of the handle, and that's if I move a little bit closer to the blade. So bigger hands, you are going to, I think, stray onto that little platform there, but you should comfortably get on to this knife. But it really does feel very comfortable in your hand. No hot spots, no sharp edges on the knife. It really does feel good. Let's look at that backspacer. So a very big titanium backspacer, and that towards the back, towards the drop of the handle, you can see it starts to stick out from behind the handle, so it sits proud of the handle, and that too has a little beveled edge to it. And then we've got the lanyard hole, there we go, that's better again, the lanyard hole that sits in that back spacer. So just a very beautifully well considered knife, and the finish on all those bits, by the way, also equally good. Really, really nicely finished off knife this. Right, let's look at that pocket clip. So tip up carry, pretty deep. You can see that that's a milled pocket clip, milled out of titanium. We've got it sort of stops short. Well, the piece that goes into your pocket prevents it from going any deeper than that point there. So you're going to get a little bit of the knife sticking out, but it is pretty deep. And then you can also see that the pocket clip has been curved to follow the shape of the handle, and that a little bit of beveling on that as well, and sort of a bead blast finish to that pocket clip, a bit of a bead blast finish to all the titanium bits on the knife when you look at it closely. But it is not reversible, and the very fact that it was curved, I suppose, told the story, because if it was reversible, you'd need 2 pocket clips in the box, and they weren't, and it is not reversible. That copper overlay cuts back a little bit at the top of the pocket clip to make allowance for that clip to fit into that little slot there. And you can see you don't have that cutaway on this side. You've only got a cutaway for the Torx screw. Torx screws, I mentioned, a pivot cap, a nice little cone shape to that pivot cap. You can see that on both sides. The one side, nicely sort of concentric circles, kind of machined into it, I suppose is the best way to describe it. But you can see when you move that in the light, how the light catches that. Gorgeous, very, very beautifully done. Right, what else? Let's have a look on the inside. So the frame, the titanium frame of the knife has been milled just to lighten it. So a little bit of milling away there to make the knife a bit lighter, but that not milled all the way through. But if we look, and I don't know if I'm going to catch this, but deeper inside, the handle has actually been skeletonized, so more to this side of the handle. That's been skeletonized. There it's been milled right through the titanium, and here it's more kind of relief cuts in the titanium. Doesn't go all the way through, and that the same on the lock side as well. Lock is the standard fare, so it is a frame lock, even though it might not look it because of that copper overlay, but it is a frame lock. And then we've got the stainless steel insert there so that you get the stainless steel on stainless steel lockup. But all over the action of the knife, the feel of the knife, it just is a very smooth feeling and smooth action on the knife. So let's speak a little bit about that action. So front flipper, as I mentioned, and we've got that front flipper that kind of really sticks out, a little bit unusual on that, but get hold of that get hold of that with your thumb and try get the shortest distance, moving your thumb in the shortest distance to the back of the knife. And that's what I'm trying to say. It flicks out beautifully. Now let's speak about that little recess and the hole cut into the blade, and that really looks too close and too small to the handle to be effective as a alternative way of opening the blade. But get that in your hand, get your middle finger into that little hole, and it spidey flicks beautifully. So on top of everything, it is a little bit of a fidget toy, this knife. And I'm going to keep quiet so you can just hear that action a bit. It snaps out. Obviously, that construction with the ceramic ball bearings and those stainless steel washers really does make this knife incredibly smooth, and it's a little bit drop shutty as well. So beautiful, beautiful knife. Nice fidget toy. Really feels good in hand. And it was, by the way, one of those knives I've mentioned now a few times that I've had this knife for a long time. This was one of those knives that when I went into the shop, and I did get this, by the way, from Blades and Triggers, where I do get most of my knives. The guys that do support the channel, let me mention that, really do appreciate their support of the channel. So check their website out for knives like this and other interesting knives and other interesting tactical goodies, BNT online. But the day I walked in, it was one of those knives that I got in my hand. First of all, I've mentioned in other reviews, I like the bronze look on a knife or copper look on a knife. And, it's a recent acquisition of mine, the CRKT Avant. And I mentioned in that review, if you haven't checked it out, it's the previous review. I do like those little bronze highlights on a knife. And so, this in this instance was copper. So first of all, aesthetically, just the look of the knife really appealed to me. And when I got it into my hand and I felt that heft and the action and all that sort of thing, it's one of those knives that I had it in my hand for a few minutes, and that was it. Decision was made, and I walked out with the knife. And I've actually EDC'd in certain circumstances. I do EDC this knife. It's kind of my more gentleman's carry dress knife, in inverted commas, is when I pull this knife and carry it. I did notice, just looking the knife over a little more closely just before doing the review, that the blade centering has gone a little off on this knife, but it was bang on perfect when I bought the knife. So I'm assuming that that's just shifted over time, probably all that fidget toying with the knife. Probably just needs a little bit of adjustment there to get it straightened, but it hasn't affected the smoothness and that action on the knife at all. There is one other little area that I picked up in terms of quality that is not 100% perfect, and I don't know if this is going to pick up. Let me just do this, maybe bring in a sheet of white paper and see if this will pick it up, but don't even know if it will. But the fit between the backspacer and the frame, there's just a little bit of a gap where you get a bit of light shining through there. And as I say, I don't know if the camera is actually going to pick this up, but just there, the fit isn't absolutely perfect. Now it's solid. There's no movement. There's no creaking. There's nothing that's loose. So it really is fastened tightly in there, but it's just sort of around this area there. You can kind of see through the knife. Now, I don't know if this is going to come out on the final video because I, only get to see this on a very, very small screen. So I'm not really sure what it is going to be looking like once I publish it. But anyway, there we go. That's the only little quality slip that I can find. The blade centering's moved off, but it certainly wasn't like that when I got the knife. But overall, a beautifully, beautifully finished knife. Gorgeous design. I really think it is a nice design. And by the way, I didn't mention that little line that's been milled into the copper, so it just adds a little more interest to that shape as well. But all in all, a well-considered knife, a well-made knife. It feels good. I like the weight to it. And this, by the way, there is another version of the knife, and this is the heavier of the two. So the other version of the knife actually has carbon fiber as the overlay instead of the copper, but I do like this. I've mentioned how many times before I like the color of copper or bronze. I like the way that this sort of weathers and gets that patina on it. So, both options were available when I first saw this knife, but I didn't even have to think about it. I went for the copper one. It's a little bit heavier. I've mentioned in other reviews, I like a little bit of heft to a knife as well, and it just adds to the solidity, the feel of solidity on this knife. Gorgeous knife. So there we go. I think I have probably covered off everything that needs to be covered off on the knife. The only thing that's probably left for me to do is size comparison. So I'm going to be doing the usual knives that I use, but before I start with them, I brought this out just to get a size perspective on another gentleman's carry, and this is the Benchmade Saibu, the Nakamura designed knife. It's a gorgeously designed knife, that as well, and that's probably right to have those two lying next to each other because they really are both very good looking knives. I'm going to tilt that slightly just so you can get the copper color. Maybe if I tilt this a little bit, you'll get the wood feel there as well. It also brings that little bit of warmth into the design there. But yeah, those two knives really do look good together. Well, they both look good on their own as well. So, there we go. Right, so that's the Benchmade Saibu. Yes, and that knife just dropped onto my lap, and no, I fortunately not done myself a serious injury. My future is safe. So, let's calm down a little bit. The other one I may as well bring on now is this, and this was the knife that I used in my previous review, and it is full of pocket fluff and dust. I mentioned in that review that I have been carrying this knife a lot. Just to give you a sense of those two together as well, and there we can see the little bit of color on those two as well, but that's more for size perspective. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. Right, let's get that back down that way. Right, size comparison. Let's get back on track. There it is against the Medford Slim Midi. Just give you some scale on that. And this knife, I think that a lot of people will be familiar with, and that is the Spyderco PM3, the smaller version. And you can see that this is a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter, but also smaller in the height measurement, but heavier. And the copper does do that to a knife. Right, the other one that I always use, the Spyderco Manix 2. Use some scale there, obviously a altogether bigger knife, right? And what else? Right, this, and I have to say it, I just would not feel right if I didn't say this. I use this knife because it's been around for a long time, and I think a lot of people will be familiar with that, and that is the Benchmade Mini Barrage. And those two knives, almost identical in length, and probably very close in thickness as well. In fact, they are very, almost identical in terms of thickness. So that should give you some perspective in terms of scale, in terms of overall size of the knife. So, guys, I think I've said it all. I think you can pick it up. A knife that... gorgeous. I really do like the knife, and I've had it for a while, and I haven't grown tired of the knife, and I suppose that also speaks volumes. First of all, that it was love at first sight when I picked up the knife, but that it's lasting love. It wasn't just lust. It is a knife that I still enjoy carrying around. I still enjoy fidgeting with, playing with. It is good looking. I haven't grown tired of the design, and it has withstood the test of time. It is, after all that fidgeting, opening and closing, it still feels very solid. And besides that that was a bit of a soft one, but besides that little bit of shift in blade centering, the rest of the knife still bang on. Gorgeous, gorgeous piece. So it has been out for a while. I know there's a number of other reviews on it, but if you haven't checked this knife out yet, and you are looking for that kind of gentleman's carry type of knife with beautiful design and so on, check this out. Get it in your hands. I think you really will be impressed overall with the knife. Guys, and I think that's just about it. I'm going to hold it at a little bit of an angle here so that you can see the color of the copper, because I do that and we lose that color in the reflections. So all that really leaves me to do is to once again thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it when you do, and as I always remind you, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, and the bell icon so that you can be notified every time I release a new video. Because also, as I always say, I really would love you to join me more often. And other than that, you go well and God bless.